Hello everyone, welcome to this lecture. In this lecture, we're going to learn about what is plagiarism and how to avoid it. In scientific writing, plagiarism is one of the unethical practices which can lead us to many different kinds of problems. So while writing a thesis or a journal article or a book chapter, any kind of scientific writing, or even unscientific writing like news articles or reports for different organizations or websites or things like that, normally we should take care of plagiarism and we should avoid plagiarism. So now let me walk you through what is plagiarism and how can we avoid it. I will walk you through some practical tips which will help you to write plagiarism-free texts. So first of all, what is plagiarism? So let's have a look in this definition here, right? And this definition is taken from the website plagiarism.org. After watching this video, I highly recommend you to visit this website and see more details there. So generally, people think that plagiarism is copying another work or borrowing someone else's original ideas and publishing it as your own or promoting it as your own. But the terms copying and borrowing can disguise the seriousness of the offense. So here we have the definition from Merriam-Webster Online Dictionary, where to plagiarize means to steal and pass off the ideas or words of another as your own, to use another's production without crediting the source, to commit literally theft, so you steal the whole idea or the whole text of others, and to present as new and original an idea or product derived from an existing source. In other words, plagiarism is an act of fraud and it involves stealing someone else's work and lying about it afterward. So there are different types of plagiarism, and this website plagiarism.org, they have categorized it based on two basic ideas. So the first category is about sources not cited. The first one is ghostwriter. The writer turns in another's work word for word as his or her own. Okay. The second one here is the photocopy. The writer copies significant portion of text straight from a single source without alteration. Third one, the putlock paper. So the writer tries to disguise plagiarism by copying from several sources, okay, tweaking the sentences to make them fit together while retaining most of the original phrasing. Fourth one here, the poor disguise. Although the writer has retained the essential content of the source, he or she has altered the paper's appearance slightly by changing keywords and phrases. The labor of laziness. The writer takes the time to paraphrase most of the paper from other sources and makes it fit all together instead of spending time and effort on doing the original work. The self-stealer. Here the writer borrows generously from his or her own previous work and violating the policies concerning expectation of originality adopted by most academic institutions. So this is what we call the self-plagiarism. So now let's have a look into the categories based on sources cited. So even though you cite the sources, you might still get into doing some plagiarism. So the first one, the forgotten footnote. So the writer mentions an author's name as a source, but neglects to include specific information on the location of the material referred. This often masks other forms of plagiarism by obscuring source location. So normally when we cite something in our article, we put the detailed bibliography information in the end of the paper or journal or thesis. So in this case, the writer or the scholar is not providing detailed information of the source he or she cited in their work. The misinformer. The writer produces inaccurate information regarding the sources, making it impossible to find them. So let's say you write something in your thesis or article and someone wants to validate the information. Okay, you cited someone that someone said this. So if the reader wants to validate that information and then they're looking for the original study, but you provided some reference information which are not correct, and you provide it in such a way that they can never validate this information because they can never find the original article. So that would be the misinformer if you put wrong reference information. The too perfect paraphrase. Here the writer properly cites a source, okay, but neglects to put in quotation mark text that has been copied word for word or close to it. Although attributing the basic ideas to the source, the writer is falsely claiming original presentation and interpretation of the information. So normally, a lot of the times, we put some information under quotation mark, okay, in a thesis or a journal article. Here, we have to put this quotation mark when we are copying things exactly as it is. Normally, when we are defining things, okay, when we are defining things, it is very common that we don't invent the definitions of different concepts. So when we are writing definitions, we take it from other places, we put it in quotation mark. But when you copy something, word for word, you also have to put the page number. Okay, for example, P11, something like that, with the reference. So let's say you put the definition in quotation mark, then you write Munim 2022 in comma, page number 11, something like that. This will be a typical in-text citation. So the citations we do when we're writing a sentence, that's the in-text citation. And then the full bibliography detail of the source will appear in the bibliography list, right? So remember this, we have to put things in quotation when we're copying it as it is, and we also have to put the page number just after that. But we cannot have more than 3 sentences as a rule of thumb in a whole report or thesis or article in quotation marks, right? Because we cannot write the whole paper only using quotation marks, copying things from others, right? So as a rule of thumb, normally not more than 3 sentences in a whole article or thesis. The resourceful citer. Here, the article properly cites all the sources, paraphrasing and using quotations appropriately. So what's the catch here? The paper contains almost no original work. It is sometimes difficult to spot this kind of plagiarism because it looks like a very well-researched document. So in these cases, what happens is that the researchers, they normally don't do any research. They don't collect data, analyze data, do the finding. They don't do anything like that. But they maintain the proper citation guidelines and paraphrasing things and so on, right? So it looks like a very good work, but it's not an original work. It's only the words of other people. So then it's kind of a resourceful citer, but it's still kind of a plagiarism. And finally, the perfect crime. So, well, as we all know, it doesn't exist. In this case, the writer properly quotes and cites sources in some places, but goes on to paraphrase other arguments from the source without citation. Okay, so we cite some of it, but not all of it from the source. Okay, we paraphrase it, but don't cite it. This way, the writer tries to pass the paraphrased material to his or her own analysis of the cited material. So this is also plagiarism. So now, how do we really avoid plagiarism? So to avoid plagiarism, we can ask ourselves 2 questions when we're writing some scientific work. So first one is, are you writing the same words of other authors? And the second one is, are you writing the same idea of other authors, but in your own words? Okay. So let's say the answer to the first question is yes. So we are writing the same words of other authors. Then we should put the sentence in quotation mark as already discussed and add reference with the page number. So here we have an example. It's taken from my own study, right? So the quality of port infrastructure has a positive effect on logistics performance in both developed and developing countries. But the quality of port infrastructure affects national economy only in developed countries. We have taken this information from this article, Munim and Shram, 2018, page number 13. You see, when we copy it exactly as it is, we put it in quotation mark, right? And we put the index citation, and then we also put the page number. And the full citation information is available on the list of bibliography. And as a rule of thumb, you should not have more than 3 sentences in quotation mark in one study. Now let's come to the second question here. If the answer to the second question is yes, that is, you're writing the same idea of other authors but in your own words, then you simply add the reference without the page number. So you still have to add the reference but not the page number. For example, here we have the paraphrase sentence. The effect of port infrastructure quality on logistics performance is higher for developed countries in comparison to developing countries. So here we only provide the citation, in-text citation without the page number. While rephrasing, you should change the structure of the sentence. And it is expected that you synthesize the information and write it in your own words. And note that only replacing a few words with synonym does not reduce the risk of plagiarism. This is a very common thing people tend to do, but just using few synonyms does not reduce the risk of plagiarism. Now, you may ask, when can we write without references? So the simple answer here is that if the information factor idea is your own or it's a general knowledge. So for example, sea transportation accounts for majority of the international trade. This information has become kind of a general knowledge. There is no need to really add any citation to it. We have the example here, but the sentence is taken from a report. So this is another thing you should also remember. When you take any information from a report, you have to also provide the page number. So only when you are using quotation and you are citing from a report, you have to mention the page number. So here you see we have an example. For example, over 80% of the international trade happens via maritime transport handled by ports worldwide. This is taken from United Nations Trade and Development Report 2018, page 65. So here it is a paraphrased information, paraphrased sentence, but here we put the information 80%. So because we put this 80%, this is not a general knowledge. Many people might not know this. So that's why we have to provide a reference to this information. And because the reference is a report, we put the page number here. Now let's look into some more points on how to avoid plagiarism. The most important thing is that we do not copy paste. Okay. So normally I don't copy any text to my original journal article file or thesis file or things like that. That's because, sometimes we tend to copy few sentences from here and there, and we are like, okay, later we are going to rephrase them or paraphrase them, but then we can forget to do it. If we do it too much here and there, we can forget it. So I never copy a single sentence, even if I plan to rewrite it later, revise it later. Okay. So normally, if I want to put something like that, I will say that, okay, I will take a note in my main Word file of the journal article. So I will write that, okay, have a look on that article on page number that and paraphrase that information. So I will write something like that. Okay. So I will never put copied sentence from other places, because it can happen that you might forget to rephrase it and then you get into trouble later. Second, understand the original source. It is very important to cite the original source of a particular information. So for example, let's say here, we are reading one article of Munim 2019, let's say. Okay, so we are reading an article of Munim 2019. But Munim 2019 cites, let's say, RHUB 2013 for a particular sentence or particular information. Okay, so this is the original study and this is what we are reading. So now you want to cite the same information that you read in Munim 2019, but you haven't looked into RHUB. Okay, you cannot really do it. You cannot cite Munim for the information that Munim take it from RHUB. What you have to do is you have to now go to the reference list of Munim and you have to find out the detailed information of RHUB 2013. Then open the PDF of that, read that. If you should double check if RHUB really said what Munim is referring to. Okay, if this study really said it. And once you double check that they really said it, then you should cite this information. You should paraphrase the original information and you should cite the original information. Now, let's say there could be cases where if you're reading something about a book that was published in 1950s or 60s. Let's say this RHUB information, it was not 2013. Let's say it was 1945. But this information is still relevant for you, and you want to cite this information. You're reading it in Munim, but you can't find the original book of that. What can you do in this case? In this case, you should try to find at least few other sources. Okay, so let's say in addition to Munim, you find also Nur 2020. You also find Stine 2017. All of them are referring to this study, saying the same thing as Munim 19 was saying, right? So now you can say that these three studies also refer to the same information, and that's why you are citing it. You are not going to write it like this. You will say that, okay, from 1945 developed this method and suggested that we follow this procedure. For example, done in Munim 2019, Nur 2020, Stina 2017. Okay, so that could be one way of doing it. But the main reference still goes to the original article from 1945. Okay, so we need to always understand the original source and cite to the original source. And then you write in your own words. We use quotes when we're copying directly. We have to cite all the relevant sources. Okay, everything that we cite in our text has to have the full information in the reference list, and everything in the reference list should be cited in our main text. And we should also use a plagiarism software. So before submitting your thesis or journal article, it's a good practice to check your article for plagiarism. I recently got to know that we can actually use the MS Word for plagiarism check. I'm not sure the quality of it. The best one I know is Turnitin, but not all universities have access to it, and all students might not have access to it, but at least try the MS Word one. I will show you shortly how it looks like. So now I'm quickly going to show you how you can actually do plagiarism check using your Microsoft Word. If you have the latest version of the Word, the licensed version, then normally you will have this tool for plagiarism check. So here I opened a blank Word file. So normally if you have a lot of text, it would look nice. So in this blank Word file here, you see I'm on home, and under home, you see I have this tool editor. So if I click here, then a few more things open. So here you see they have some options like editor score, so calculated at 100 words. So I should write some things, and then I will have all these scores. It will help you with the spelling, grammar, clarity, conciseness, punctuation, conventions and vocabulary. And here you have the similarity check to all resources. So if you click this one, and if you have some text, then it will check plagiarism. Because I don't have any text here, so that's why it shows 0% similarity. But note that this might not be a very good tool. You know, it might not be able to compare with all the journal articles published out there, but it is still something better than nothing, right? Best is if you have access to Turnitin software. And for citing all the references, I highly recommend everyone to use a referencing manager software. For example, Zotero. Zotero is a open source free software. So another popular software is EndNote or Mendeley. But for those, sometimes you need the subscription. For Zotero, it's a free open source software, so you don't need any subscription. We'll publish another video on Zotero later. You should always use a reference manager when you are writing a scientific work. Use it from day one. It's always hard to adapt it in later stages of writing, so use it in day one. Use it in bachelor thesis, master thesis, PhD, and journal article. And always check for plagiarism before you submit it to a journal or to a university. And a little bit more on how to avoid plagiarism. So here, again, repeating this point that you should always use proper referencing. And for referencing, the most widely used one, I think, is APA referencing style. APA stands for American Psychological Association. So the APA, they publish guidelines time to time. The latest version is APA 7th edition, okay, for referencing style. Here we have this website, Schilde Composite. So you can actually go there and check out the required information that you must provide for any referencing.